Awesome. I think we're live here. Oh, great. Um, Thanks for joining us for today. Our guest today is David Becker. David is a premier agent in Central PA, specifically in the Palmyra and Hershey markets. He and his wife have built a fantastic team that, I mean, I know them because I get their postcards constantly. And David, I love your marketing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, what you do, and then we can kind of jump into the market. And actually, you started telling me earlier about how you got into the business. Why don't we start there?
Yeah, so my wife and I run a real estate team based in the greater Hershey market. Our office is actually in Hershey. We live in Palmyra, so most of our business is centered around that area. We both have our associate broker licenses as well. We got into real estate back in 2015. Since then, opened up some other opportunities where real estate investors have a portfolio of rentals. I'm an investor in a title company, actually an investor in the Keller Williams offices in Harrisburg, Hershey, and Lebanon as well. But the story from the beginning, Carin and I met at Verizon Wireless back in 2010. We had careers. I relocated 5 times for the company all across the Northeast. And we ended up actually getting both technically laid off. It was actually my mom's birthday, January 28th of 2015. We both got laid off on the same day. We got severance packages. Literally simultaneously at 8 in the morning or whatever time it was, she's texting me, I'm in a meeting, and both of our departments were shut down. Now, it did work out at that time. We had 30 days to find a new job. We both found jobs and ended up staying for a few more years at Verizon. But, throughout that 30 days of unknown period, we were stressed out. We're like, okay, this could wipe out all of our income. What do we do next? We actually said, okay, we got to put ourselves in a position that can't happen again. And we had liked real estate. We had a couple of rentals at that point. We were going to open houses on Sunday just for something to do. So like, hey, why don't we get our real estate licenses? I had originally gotten mine as a 20-year-old back in 1999. It's hard to sell real estate when you live in a bedroom in your parents' house. So I sold a couple of houses then and went a different direction. But because of that layoff, we ended up getting our real estate licenses. Just 7 months later, we're both licensed in August of 2015. And that's when it started. So back then, we both worked full time, and Carin stayed full time from 2015 the whole way to May of 2018. So 3 years in the business, she still was working full time, and I stayed full time a year later till 2019. Our first year, we sold 21 homes, both working full-time jobs at Verizon. I was traveling across the entire Northeast. So for us, it was proof of concept at that point, saying, okay, can we build something so that the next time we have a career changing or career ending decision, that we have something else built that's sustainable. So 21 houses the first year, 57 the second year, 100 the third. And it was that.
Wow.
Actually, I was in the state real estate commission signing up for my broker's license. At that time, we had a vision to go and open an independent brokerage. And Carin was texting me saying she got in trouble. She missed another call. She was dealing with a real estate matter. At that time, we both had 2 phones, 2 laptops. We're doing Verizon stuff in one part of our life and real estate in the other part. And, there was times where I would be in the bathroom in a meeting at Verizon on a 2-minute break calling, trying to close a deal. So it got pretty hectic. So she kind of got on the radar for not balancing both well, because we're doing 100 sales. And I said, from the real estate commission, I texted her. I said, listen, I think now's the time. Why don't you give your notice? And she said, really? And she gave her 2-week notice back in 2018. We then did see an increase, 148 sales the next year, because she was able to focus on it more. I was still full-time with Verizon at that point, but also pretty much full-time real estate. So that's kind of how it got started. So it was all proof of concept, just to make sure that we could build something sustainable, because we were making good incomes at Verizon. We couldn't just walk away with 2 kids and a mortgage payment and all that stuff. So we wanted to build something so that we could transition to it when it was time was right. So we probably stayed at Verizon too long, but honestly, it was tempting to keep the salary, keep the benefits, for as long as we could. But then ever since 2019, obviously we've been, full-time real estate. But back to one of your original questions, how do we get started? That's kind of the story. But the way we actually got started was I did a lot of research on geographical farming, like how to become top of mind for the realtor of choice when somebody needs a realtor, right? So we were new to Palmyra. When I met Carin in 2010, she lived in Lebanon. I lived in Carlisle. We wanted somewhere somewhat in the middle with a good school district. So we literally just said, how about Palmyra? So it wasn't like we could go out and use our network and our sphere. Plus, it was a little bit more difficult for us, being that we both were at Verizon and we weren't putting on LinkedIn or Facebook or anything that we're realtors, right? Because we had this other career. We kind of had to hide it because, you know, we were doing two things at once. So we started doing the geographical farming, which meant in the beginning, buying a mailing list of a couple different neighborhoods. I think it was about 600 homes back then, and we would print letters or postcards, mailing labels, stick them onto the postcard, go out and buy stamps, take them to the post office. And you know, about 2 months in, we got a listing for a house in Old Stone Way, a nice neighborhood in Palmyra. Ended up selling that one. So we're like, okay, maybe this can work, right? So we expanded it to 2,000 homes, 5,000 homes, 10,000 homes. Started mailing to more and more homes, and really the whole strategy there was to build a book of business, or at least a reputation or a perceived reputation that we've been in the business longer than we have, that we're the experts in a small community. And it worked. I mean, thankfully, I used to look and say, how do these people do it? How does another agent do it with very little advertising? Just because they've been around for a while, their black book has expanded and they get, you know, referrals and repeat clients and so forth. For us, you know, we got phone calls and you know, kind of, I guess, respect from the local community of Palmyra, because we targeted a very dense area. And when you saw our signs, you would see 4, 5, 6, 7 signs in one town, maybe a couple on one road. And people would be like, oh my gosh, you're everywhere. And it was funny because we weren't everywhere. We were just in a lot of places in a small area. So it felt like we were everywhere. And then we became the obvious person to call. Like, why would I go with someone else when I can go with these guys that are moving the real estate? And I do credit some of that with Keller Williams. They allow you to brand your own unique identity within their franchise, right? So we have our own picture, our own colors, our own font. So while you may not see and notice a Remax or a Coldwell Banker sign as much, Iron Valley, whatever it may be, because they're standard, ours, we got people joking. We had almost like our first picture was like a prom picture. Karen's hand is on my chest and we're a little too coupley in the picture, but people remembered it, right? So they're like, oh my gosh. You know, because when you drive by a Coldwell Banker or Remax sign, you're not remembering Josh or Ian. You're just seeing the brand, right? When you see our sign, you see the people, and then you see them later at the grocery store or at the wrestling match, and it kind of all ties together.
Well, yeah, that's how
David.
What's that, Josh?
Well, I was going to say that's how Ian and I got our start too. It's like stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing,
right?
Yep. And I was the one at the time. I don't think you were burning the candle at both ends, but in like 08, I had a job and I was like doing the real estate. You know, we were investors. So we were doing a lot of wholesaling. And I remember that time when you're like, it's such a weird balance, right? Because you're burning the candle at both ends and you're like, can I really give up? You know, first of all, do I want to give up my salary and stuff? Because you're socking away some nice money with real estate. Like you're just doubling down on that cash coming in your pocket. So you're like, I don't really know if I want, like, I'm just sticking all this in a bank. Do I want to start drawing from that? And then you're like, can I do it? So you're thinking about having all these thoughts. And then it's like you said, at some point, there's just like something that just pushes you over the edge and you're just like, we got this. And then you realize looking back, you're like, man, I wish I did it earlier. you know, right?
I had two phones. One was Verizon, one was real estate. And honestly, it got to the point where I didn't care what happened on the Verizon. I had an obligation to answer that phone and deal with it. But this phone call could be a $10,000 sale. And I remember one day we were at the Turkey Hill parking lot on the way home. And I was like, Karen, I don't want to do this anymore. Like you know, and it wasn't long. Once I made that decision, you know, I just looked for the right time to exit. And, you know, we did it in June strategically because we were seeing, you know, an uptick in the spring and summer business. And we felt like it would make sense. But thankfully, having that dual career gave me the luxury to put extra money into marketing without having to worry I wouldn't be able to make my next month's bill payments because I was subsidized by Verizon. So I do credit a lot of it, to having that luxury. But top of mind awareness, I mean, people say that you should go digital with your advertisements and so forth. But because less and less people are mailing, in your mailbox, people notice it more. I mean, it got to the point with 10,000 homes, we had a full-blown production facility in our kitchen on mailing nights. I had 10,000 mailers, I had postage scales, I had boxes, I had labels. And now since then we've outsourced that. Somebody else does it for us. But, I was all about I was all about saving money and doing it ourselves. Carin, I was working, right? So Karen's dragging these things to the post office. They're heavy. The post office is actually annoyed that we're giving them $2,000 of business because they just don't want to deal with it. So they're kind of rolling their eyes and telling us the mailmen hate us and so forth. But anyhow, it's all worked out. So.
Yeah, that's and that's true. And like, people ask me a lot of times, I get the question from like, newer people like, hey, should I quit? I'm going to quit my job. Or they get this plan, like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to live off my savings for 6 months. I'll be, it'll work out. Like, they just want to quit their job more than but I'm like, don't do that. I was like, the pressure that you're going to mount on yourself is incredible. And like, you're just going to be pulling from the savings account. It's too much. Like, spend the time to work weekends, work nights, like work your 100-hour weeks, because that subsidized, like, it's a subsidized income is what Verizon was for you.
Yeah, and some people need that do or die type of scenario. Like, hey, I quit and went all in because that wasn't me. It's not me now. It wasn't me at the time. That to me is too stressful. Where you would probably give up before you experience success out of the necessity to provide for your family.
Yeah.
But we didn't do just mailers. We did open houses every Sunday, right? We would, divide. She would do one, I would do one. We got probably a dozen sales a year through open houses and networking. Plus, it backed up our brand they saw in our mailboxes, right? When they see you in a house, when they see you, at the grocery store, they see you handing out business cards, they see you in the community, like it all kind of ties together. And they're like, wait, are you the person from the mailer? And people recognize us more. And since then, we have dialed back a little bit on that. And we've done Zillow. Now we do a lot of database, like working. We have a list of people that know, like, and trust us that probably would transact with us in the future, but they may not if we allow them to forget about us. So, right, we do 4 big events a year. We do, obviously newsletters and different touch points to them just to make sure that, okay, we have your business, we have your attention now, but there's a long time between real estate transactions, right? Usually 7 to 10 years. So you may not remember me 7 to 10 years from now, or even a couple of years from now when your friend or family member goes to buy or sell a home, if I allow you to forget. But if I don't allow you to forget, you'll probably recommend me because you were happy with me just a couple of years ago.
So let's fast forward. Different market. This is your first time being in this kind of market, right? So Josh and I had this. We got into the market when this happened. We didn't know any different. You got into 2015. So what are you doing? How are you adapting? Obviously, here's one thing I'm noticing about just talking to you is that when you came in very strategically. A lot of people don't do that. The way you came about it was just very strategic, and it was the right way to do it. Looking back, we did similar stuff too, but it was just kind of the way we approached it. So I'm sure you're approaching this time now. You're like, okay, the market is shifting, my first experience, but it's not like you're throwing your hands up. You're going, okay, how do I strategically shift? I'm sure that's what your mindset is saying to you right now. So what are you doing?
You have to figure out what's your appetite for that risk, right? Like, so I've done a lot of expense cutting exercises where I've gone through line by line, credit card and business expenses to see what's necessary, what's not. But at the same time, where do you ramp up, right? It's not like all realtors will go out of business in this shift, right? Some people will thrive. I know you had Mike McCann on a few months ago. I watched a video back on your YouTube. I mean, I'm confident he will thrive in this shift because he'll double down with his marketing, with his efforts, with his door knocks, whatever it may be. And there's market share to gain in the shift. So for us personally, it's probably going a little less with the expensive stuff and a little bit more with the touchy-feely stuff, right? So, we're doing an ice cream social here for the first day of the school's out, June 9th or 10th. We're touching our database. We're calling to do giveaways and thank them and do touch points. We're calling them at their 1 month and 1 year anniversary when they bought or sold a home, just to make sure the transition treated them well. So I think it's just getting close to the people. Thankfully, we have about 700 closed transactions, right? So we have, essentially 1,000 people with spouses and so forth in our database from those people that have actually transacted with us. And we have another couple thousand from leads that haven't yet. So, doing a CRM, a 36 or 60 touch plan with those people just to keep top of mind because they will end up transacting. People are reluctant to do so. With the interest rate environment, the reality is the market has changed. Like, so we went from 2.99% interest rate just a year and a half ago, where the whole world refinanced, right? Like, you were crazy if you didn't refinance. So the problem with inventory, just 2 weeks ago in all of Palmyra, where Josh and I live, there was 3 homes for sale. One was 1.6 million. one was a modular home, and one was like an overpriced flip in the middle. So for all intents and purposes, if someone was moving to the area, and even if they had to buy a home, if I get an offer from Hershey Med and I start on June 1st, what am I going to do? I'm probably not going to buy one of those three. I'm going to have to go to a bigger geographical radius, or I'm going to have to spend more money or rent, right? So the lack of inventory has really been a concern for us because there's not as many reasons to move. We haven't had much new construction in several years in our area. People have a 2.99% interest rate. They'd be faced with probably a more expensive home and doubling that rate. So we're seeing just this week, in the last 7 days, we wrote on 4 different condos and townhouses for buyers and lost all 4 to cash buyers, right? So that's another real concern. When the rates are higher, cash starts getting pulled out of investments, or, you're borrowing from a family member, from your 401k. So we had 4 very well qualified buyers that didn't get the home that they wanted in the last 7-8 days because they're losing out to cash. So, I think I'm a little all over the place here, but the real environment is less inventory. We're going into the spring and summer buying months where it's always strong, right? There's always people that want to, buy a home when it's nice weather. If they're moving school districts, they want to change schools when their kids are on break from school. The rates have come down. I think you can get a 5.99 right now if you have good credit. So I think the rates were high enough, long enough, that now that they're back in the 5s, it's like a breath of fresh air, where people before, when they went up so quickly, we just thought they would go down quickly. So it went from 3 and all of a sudden it's 4, 5, 6%. I'm going to wait this thing out. But now there's no waiting it out, right? Like the new reality is probably in the 5s, but I wouldn't let that hold buyers back, because over all of history, since the day that all 3 of us were born, home values go up almost every single year with a rare exception. So buy your home now, lock in the price and the value of the home, and then it'll be a refinance opportunity. Whether it's 6 months or 2 years from now, you'll be able to get a better rate.
Do you think that rates are going to go back down? I mean, maybe in the short term, but like a month ago, we were at 7% interest rates, 7 plus.
A month ago, we were at 7. Now I think you can get 5.99. I mean, I think they'll go down. I don't think short term they'll go down to 2.75 or 3.25, the rates that we've seen recently, because I think that almost didn't make sense for the market. But I would expect, here we are in April, I would expect by end of year, maybe we'll see 5.5, low 5s. I think that just becomes the new reality. And I think people will accept it when there's been 2 years or so of the higher number. Now it feels like I'm winning when I get a 5.5 or 5.25. It's just that it was just shock before, when you went from 3 to 7 in the course of 12 months. You couldn't help but feel as a buyer, oh my God, I missed my chance to be a homeowner. I'm going to have to sit this one out for a few years. But now, at the end of the day, there's catalysts that people are going to have to and want to buy or sell a home, right? Marriage, divorce, job relocation. Like there's certain times where you're just going to buy regardless of the rate almost. I mean, homes were still sold when the rates were 17% in the 70s,
right.
So it's not like the real estate market is going to shut down.
What do you see any softening coming? Because I mean, the issue now, right, is like we got a bunch of buyers that went away because the interest rates went up, but also there's no softening on the inventory. I looked this morning. There's 4 houses in active listings, and 6 closing. Like we're talking about 18 properties that have any kind of status on the MLS in the last month. That's insane.
Yeah, what I'm saying is the person that owns the 2-story family style home, the 3 or 4 bedroom home with a 2-car garage and a nice backyard, they're not moving, right? Because they refinanced. A lot of the business that we got for that type of house was like a corporate relocation. Businesses aren't relocating their people unless they're, first responders or in certain fields, military and so forth. I think any softening, I think it's going to get worse as far as the competitive environment here for the next 4 or 5 months, at least, because we always have buyer demand in the spring and summer. We have slightly lower rates than we had recently. And you want to move in the spring and summer. Now, at the same time, sellers want to sell in the spring and summertime. Like we've always told people, the best time to sell your house is April, May, June, late spring, early summer, because that's when people, all the reasons I mentioned, move in school districts and nicer weather and so forth. But I think it's going to be very competitive. I mean, just before I got on this podcast, there's a house in Palmyra that listed in Springbrook Farms, and it's going to go like a hotcake. That thing will be sold guaranteed with multiple offers, by the end of the weekend. So, and it becomes a challenge because it'll be sold to the buyer with the deepest pockets, right? The one that goes way over the price, the one that's willing to waive inspections, the one that's willing to come out of pocket if it doesn't appraise. I mean, you have to be a strong buyer to get a house, and you also have to have strong representation because it does take some networking and creativity right now.
Well, yeah, and well, go ahead, Ian. What were we going to?
Yeah, I was just thinking, so you're projecting, David, that you think that the interest rates are going to go down. So the whole question we've been leading up on the show is like how the Fed is going to move this. They were talking about doing a soft landing versus hard landing, and they're going to try to do like the step up thing, like raise it, flatten it, drop price maybe a little, and then go back up, and then go back up. And we just had the thing that like instigated the interest rates, or that their interest rates are really being poised on right now, I think is the SVB collapse and the bank collapse and stuff like that. So there's like these other influences right now in the market that are really influencing on the surface the Fed. So, the question is, does it really end up being a soft landing, or is it like protective mode? Like, to me, a soft landing is like the Fed is like, hey, the economy has reestablished itself, inflation is under control, so we don't really need to raise rates. As opposed to like the SVB situation was more like, if we raise rates, we're going to look scared. If we don't raise rates, we're going to look scared. Like it was like this. It was for the wrong reasons, I guess. It wasn't bringing confidence to the market.
SVB was Silicon Valley. I mean, that was like a venture capitalist bank. I think that's a little bit different, right? It's a high risk institution to begin with, but
the treasury bonds were what sunk them. It wasn't
just risk. SVB relative to real estate. It was bringing consumer confidence into the dollar, right? So it scares the dollar. That's more. Not correlating so much.
Ian, one thing that you really got to understand about Central PA is like it's still a manufacturing. It's got a manufacturing base and a very strong blue collar base there that doesn't have a lot of ripple effects from even stuff like SVB and stuff like that. Like even though like these tech firms and stuff are cutting 10 and 25% of their workforce and all that stuff, there's a ton of factory workers over at Hershey. Like there's a ton of government workers in Harrisburg, and like there's a ton of small businesses that are still working in Central PA, even when a lot of the more volatile markets in the country.
So it's just a more stable feel, which
we're protected from it. In our area, like a commuting distance from the market that I serve, you have Hershey Med is a big time employer in the area. You have Hershey Company, right? You have Indiantown Gap, you have the Capitol. You can get to Lancaster, Lebanon, a lot of major hospitals and companies. So Hershey's 8th in the state. Last time I checked in school ratings, Palmyra's a 9. So we're very much protected from a lot of that, Obviously, nobody's protected from inflation, but we're protected from unemployment. We're protected. People want to live, in the area that we serve. So I think for the most part, I have a conversation a lot with people buying, homes in Derry Township, right? Like there's limited land in Derry Township because the trust owns everything it's not built on. And people want to be there for the schools. So the value, traditionally, if the country's going up 4%, Hershey's going up 6 or 7%. Like you're reestablishing value there. And I think, my advice is just don't let the interest rate affect you, right? The Fed's looking at unemployment, they're looking at inflation, but if you wait to buy a home and it's $20,000 or $30,000 more next year, it doesn't matter really what the rate did. It matters that you didn't get in at the lower price. I think we're very protected from that. You can always get a lower rate later. I don't expect us to have a major price correction. I mean, we're still up in home prices in our area versus last year, where I know some major cities are seeing a decline, right? There's some exodus happening in parts of the West, California and so forth, where they're seeing the home values drop off. So it's not the same for everybody. I think that's what you need to understand is like, how do I attack the current environment in my market that I focus on?
I'd say that's a good way to write a time on the show. It's a good way to leave it as to how to attack, or the key with any of the successful players that we've had on the show, like you said, like McCann and an SD and those guys, everybody's just adapting. Like it's really not that big of a deal that the market is shifting to, and that's clearly what you're doing. You're not thinking like all the realtors that got washed out. they just couldn't adapt, and that's fine. Like that's just more to eat for, as it comes time. Now it might not be more to eat at the moment because of the supply, but like as you come up out of this thing, I remember, Josh, you remember when we were coming up out of like 08, 09, like you look back and go, oh, that's how a shift happens. And all the people that are making killings now were making, they were in that shift. They were capturing the market share. They were adapting into what was going on. So, I mean, obviously, David, you're doing a really good job adapting. Your mindset's very strong. And that's probably the most important thing, honestly, is what I've noticed, at least going through these things with people that we deal with. But on the bottom of the screen, for anybody that wants to contact you, that's the best contact information, right? It's been scrolling the whole time. teambeckerrealtors.com, and your phone number's there. And awesome. We're trying to do these once every 6 months as the market continues to shift. And then once it stables out, it'll be boring. And then we'll do once every 2 years or something. So until then, though, we'll keep in touch with it.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, Josh. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Ian. Nice to meet you. And we'll talk to you later.
All right,
Awesome.
David.
David, thanks so much.
You got
Take
it.
care.
Guys.
See ya.